was the end of the highway, and you had to, you know, that was it. It was a circular road to the overpass, and then you go into San Fernando. But Port of Spain, you have to go through Port of Spain to go west of Port of Spain. And there's a significant amount of people living in multiple suburbs west of Port of Spain. So it's kind of crazy that we're going off of, hey, you want to talk about colonialism? We're going off of colonial road networks built for the traffic that TNT had in, what, the 1950s and 60s or 40s, right? This is 2023. We have no sort of planning with regards to, okay, we have limited roads, do we limit the cars? Like what levers do we have to pull officially and unofficially to try to keep the situation, you know, from getting out of hand? And for the most part, there's not being done. There's no plan.
Oh, here's the best part. On my journeys from Port of Spain all the way to my beautiful home in the east, oh God, home was so beautiful when I got home last night, considering you're stuck in traffic and your foot is cramping. Anyway, not one police vehicle.
Ah.
Everybody was out getting dinner last night, eh? Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, enough of this delay, just like our road systems in TNT. Let's get into your data review. Well, our first story comes from the Trans-Tobago Police Service, specifically the Homicide Bureau of Investigation Cold Case Unit. They've cracked a 17-year-old murder investigation. Well done to the TTPS.
Yes.
It's the finer details that are a bit... but, you know, no murder is a laughing matter. But imagine that the matter was investigated by the Homicide Bureau of Investigations Officers Region 1 of the Trans-Tobago Police Service when the murder of Kevin St. John took place on May 7th, 2006. However, they exhausted all revenues that were available to them at the time. The matter was then referred to the Cold Case Unit. A major crack came in the case when the file was reviewed by Cold Case Specialist Kirk Griffith, who generated an extensive report with recommendations, and a clinical approach was taken to bring closure to the matter. 17 years later. So, what were the resources or avenues available to Kirk Griffith that was not available to Region 1 Homicide Bureau investigators? Could you answer it? Because I can't.
He generated an extensive report with recommendations, and a clinical approach was taken to bring closure to the matter. Why? The interesting thing, and this is where communication is funny. First of all, yes, kudos to the TPS. It is just but one case, but at least we're seeing some results. The language used, usually what happens is when the story is being written, reporters tend more often not to use the language that the press release to say, you know, what happened, right? Because you don't want to be inaccurate, so you don't necessarily want to take too much liberty with modifying the language of the story, right? Although one could argue that to some extent you should be able to, if you fully understand the story. But you generally would use the language of the press release, so you will be as accurate as possible. So it makes me question, if that is what happened in this case, if there was a press release and they used the terms clinical approach, after extensive reports and recommendations were made, you know, if that came from a press release from the TTPS, if, you know, what is, as you said, so different? Because it's not as though we hear this very often in any sort of investigation, much less a cold case. 17 years, right? What about his approach? What about his ability to look at the information that other officers deemed there's not enough here to figure it out? And he was able to figure it out and have an approach, use a term that we just don't hear in policing.
Well, again, I will stress, kudos to the Trans-Tobago Police Service. It's also amazing that, considering the short lifespan that Trinbagonians have these days, with a plethora of issues, that they were able to actually still apprehend the suspect in Kelly Sean alert.
The irony of what you just said there, But I think you're right in the sense of not just the fact that, okay, the suspect, they were able to apprehend him. I assume witnesses are still alive. These are all practical considerations for cases as old in TNT. But the fact that how many people actually had confidence that the cold case unit could solve cases? Think about it, right? A cold case unit is facing an uphill battle wherever you are, whether it's America, Canada, UK, France, Australia, Japan, TNT, right? There's a reason why you weren't able to solve it the initial go around. You know, something was holding you up. So kudos to the cold case unit.
In conclusion, it took 17 years for this case to be solved and 17 years for the suspect to be apprehended. It's going to take 20 years for this case to now be closed.
That's rough. That is rough, boy. That is, the suspect has 17 years of freedom in between.
And probably another 20 years in remand.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on to the next story.
So this story is interesting, and I feel as though a lot of people will want to disagree with it because of who the speaker is. The Prime Minister, I believe he made a lot of comments on different topics at a breakfast with the Prime Minister at Hilton, Trinidad, Port of Spain, yes, Tuesday or Wednesday. Anyway, one of the things that he commented about was the fact that he was pointing to certain failures in the current education system. And he was basically saying, or he is reported of saying, that it created a conveyor belt of uneducated young gang members. That is to say, when young people, go through the education system and they are not properly prepared, so they go from primary school to secondary school and they're not prepared for a secondary school curriculum, it doesn't have to be like a big failure, but these things could snowball, and then you have individuals who, they are not educated, they don't necessarily have those prospects for life, so they go on to join the gangs. And while some people might be quick to say, well, why are you blaming the education system for when this is wrong with the criminal justice system and that is wrong with the criminal justice system, I can't disagree with what he said, because I have been saying that for months. So it is one more area that is contributing to crime. The question is, did he now realize it? And what is he going to do about it? Because I would argue that this is a problem that existed way long before this week. And I don't see anything in the Ministry of Education that makes me think, well, they're actually trying to address the various deficiencies I suspect that ministry has.
I'll be very honest with you. I haven't seen the Prime Minister's entire speech, so I can only comment based on what is being reported in the newspaper. However, really, I mean, you're the Prime Minister for the last 7 years. Now you're making this statement with regards to our education system and how it's contributing to the criminal element here in Trinidad and Tobago. Really? Apart from that, what is very, very frustrating is the mere fact that you're suggesting that education, or the education school system, should be for the privileged few as it was previously. The thing is, you're only going to create a further gap. For those who fail secondary entrance assessment, what's going to happen to them if they're not going to be accepted into the secondary school system? Where are they going to go? What are they going to do? Thing is, secondary school system should allow, I'm not saying it actually does or students actually go for it, but it should allow for an opportunity for students to actually learn different avenues where they can earn a legitimate income for themselves.
I think you should explain to people why what he said to cause you to react like this.
He says that because it's creating a conveyor belt, he says, once we've made a decision that everybody goes to high school, the question remains, what about those children who enter the secondary school system having not been readied in the primary system? Why is it in 2023 primary school students are not ready for the secondary school system?
And the thing is, I have no problem having a discussion, but to some extent, if you're going to target something so basic, the automatic promotion of all children into secondary school, well, first of all, I do think to some extent just about I don't know of any jurisdiction where kids don't go from one stage of school to the next more or less automatically until they finish secondary school or high school, right? I don't know of any jurisdiction where you at an infant stage, at 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, you do an assessment and you know what? Further schooling is just not meant for you. I don't know of any country that does this, right? So listen, we should never discount the discussion, how he's framing it, I believe, and the conclusions that he's drawing, just off of a very straightforward and limited analysis of the situation, I don't think is particularly practical or useful, right? He might actually have identified a practical problem, but the solution that he implies, I don't really see how that will work.
Do not disagree with the Prime Minister that the education system needs revamping. There needs to be a thorough revision. There needs to be a thorough assessment. And we need to be extremely critical of our education system, constructively. What I would say is that as Prime Minister for the last 7 years, and I keep going back to the fact that he was an excellent opposition leader. I'd quicker give him a PhD, an honorary PhD, when he was opposition leader than an honorary PhD as a Prime Minister. But the thing is, you've been here for the last 7 years. You've been priming yourself for this position for how long? What is Keith Rowley's impact, or Keith Rowley's administration impact on the education system here in Trinidad and Tobago? What are you doing to contribute to its improvement? So the thing is, you're coming out and you're making statements like these, and they're not necessarily wrong if you break it down and say, okay, great, yes, we agree, education system needs a fix. But you're the one that is responsible for doing that. You're the one that is responsible. You have a line minister that should be getting all these things in order. So the thing is, you need to have public schools. You need to upgrade the public school system. You need to ensure that all public schools are funded equally. You need to have the situation where it allows for children in a neighborhood to go from a preschool level all the way up to a secondary school level, and not have some students traveling an hour plus on a morning to get to school. That's all parts of the issue. But beyond that, Prime Minister, I urge you, as part of the problem, you, your cabinet, as well as the opposition, and forgive me if you think I'm politicizing this, need to look in the mirror. Because you guys do not set an example for the young people of Trinidad and Tobago. It is unfortunate that you are the leaders that we have to look up to when your decorum and your practice, again, on both sides, is absolutely appalling, disgusting, and distasteful many a times. And all of that is part of education when young people are looking up to you guys. So that too is part of the problem. So yeah, fix your education system, but fix all yourselves as well, because I'll go a long way in helping us.
I think one of the things that we take for granted is what I learned in school, what I learned during my degree, how much of it will be applied in everyday life. And with regards to communication of national issues, I find it very similar to writing an academic paper, where, a lot of these principles of integrity and how you frame your arguments, how you support your arguments, to try to not to, some basic things like don't contradict yourself, etc., etc. But the other thing is basic things like who, what, when, where, how. You can't just make a claim and not say why or how. Not just how is it affecting the situation or how is it an issue, but how are you going to then fix it? You have conclusions at the end of any sort of academic paper. And like one of our viewers who used to admonish us to just say, okay, we have a problem. You're the Prime Minister. The country does not just want to know what you think the problems are. Because if you're in the opposition, fine, that's good enough. That is good enough to be in the opposition. But you are the Prime Minister. We need, the next step, which is to say, What is your intentions? It doesn't even have to be the final intentions. It could be the initial intentions. How are you going to solve this problem? Because what you're saying is, we have a problem. Cool. We don't care what the problems are necessarily. That's not what really the voting public wants to know. They want to know that you could solve the problem. So he comes with the statement. And I get it, you know, and maybe it was an off-the-cuff remark and he wasn't prepped for it. But at the flip side, as you pointed out, it's been 7 years. This is the ministry with the largest allocation. And I suspect this is one of the ministries with the biggest problem.
What do you mean you suspect? It is the ministry with probably the biggest problem.
With the most long-term impacts. Because right now we're benefiting off of, you know, the performance of our education system 10, 20 years ago. That's what society is being fueled by now. But 10, 20 years from now, when the kids in primary school now are going to be so many people coming up through these various systems of professional employment, right? Whether it's government offices or banks or major corporations in the country, what's it going to look like then?
Example, big failure for our education system. You had to relocate students from St. George's College in Barrett to the UTT South Walton campus. Students relocate, infrastructure breaking down, bathrooms not working properly. The students said they were depressed. They'd rather go back to St. George's campus. Imagine that. That's just one example, by the way.
And how many schools? How many schools do we hear stories like that?
How many schools indeed?
That doesn't even touch on problems with the curriculum.
By the way, separate issue. Separate issue. Part of the problem, but separate to what the Prime Minister is saying. He was speaking at breakfast with the Prime Minister at Hilton Conference. And since we speak about the education system, I am just wondering, you think the Prime Minister could eat a box breakfast or a box lunch? What it is that they are serving, like, for example, many a times you get good meals. You get rice, lentils, and stew chicken. Somebody was posting a photo the other day to social media saying, is this nutritious? And should be lunch for a 12-year-old to a 17-year-old in a high school setting. It looked like a piece of dough with cheese and a slice of tomato on it. And people will make the argument, listen, it's better that they're getting that than nothing at all. People in Trinidad will die for that. Listen, guys, fair argument. But could the Prime Minister eat a box lunch or a box breakfast? We underestimate the variety of foods that used to be available Prime
to
Minister,
us.
should I serve a box breakfast at this Hilton meeting? See how people would react. Let's take a break here on the program.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing now, Andy.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white, and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. Well, yesterday in the Senate passed the validation bill, basically to kind of rectify the situation that the Privy Council's ruling on the extension for our local government councillors and officials, extension, or now the lack thereof, what that ruling caused, just to kind of get things back in line and get all of the work that has been going on in the last 6 months on proper legal footing. Now, the debate was actually somewhat interesting. Of course, those on the government and opposition benches, they sprinkled in their political speak, so to say. So it wasn't necessarily all just factually based. But the independent senators, they also weighed in and gave a slightly different viewpoint on certain things. But then again, maybe it wasn't that different. So for more, it's time to cue this.
Experienced draftsman, multiple lawyers for the state, the lower court, our Court of Appeal, and 2 senior law lords saw the issues one way. But a majority of 3 judges in the Privy Council saw things differently. Had a different panel been drawn, whether the judgment might have been different. In particular, one can't help but wonder whether the presence of 2 Scottish judges in the majority had a discernible effect on the outcome of the case. When you look at paragraphs 30 to 34 and 40 to 42 of the judgment, they strike me as gratuitous. Now, my take on these paragraphs is that the UK Supreme Court, the Privy Council, was firing a shot across the bow of the UK Westminster Parliament. While I don't disagree with the message or the legal learning involved in those paragraphs, one wonders if these paragraphs are foreshadowing leanings or concerns of the UK Supreme Court in the event it is called upon to adjudicate on the Scotland Act 1998 and renewed calls for Scottish independence in the wake of Brexit. Now, my conjecture may be unfounded, but whether one agrees with me or not, it cannot be disputed that the dicta I have just cited represents a warning, not just to this Parliament, but to all parliaments in the Commonwealth, not to play fast and loose with voting rights and democratic processes, and not to make decisions pertaining to representation on behalf of citizens. Whether such dicta were even necessary in this case, given the circumstances, I leave as an open question. The reason we are here today is not to rectify an egregious attempt on the part of government to breach constitutional rights. It's not to rectify an attempt to kidnap the rights of the people to elect their own representatives as alleged. The reason we are here today is to correct what has been held by the Privy Council to be a drafting error.
I think Ravi Balgobin Maharaj must be praised because his legal action ensures that democracy and the right to vote is maintained. It sends a clear message, not just to us, but throughout the Commonwealth, of the citizens' right to vote. So this Privy Council decision, judges, has a broader message, not just us. It sends a much-needed message about the power of the citizens to choose their representatives. But I looked at the question, Mr. President, about, the local government looking at putting it at 4 years and moving it from 3 years. And 3 years would have had the advantage of a mid-year review of any government in position to look and gauge how they are performing, to tell the government, hey, we may not like that, not just looking at councillors underperforming. Also, the fact that if you extend it to 4 years, I say, but why not 5? We are faced with economic challenges. And sometimes it may make more sense, sir, if you have an election, local government election, in tandem with general elections, which could serve as a one election for all.
So I want to focus on Independent Senator Vieira. Now, on the surface, it seems that subtly they were not necessarily exactly on the same page. Because while the Independent Senator Vieira did not have the same sort of bluster that was coming out of the Minister of Local Government and the opposition bench, because both Senator Mark and Senator Lashmidial, who we'll have later on to probably speak on this very same topic from that perspective, were very fiery, especially Senator Lashmidial with her responses to the former AG, now local government minister. But I did find it both interesting and concerning, because to me it felt as though, one, he was sounding like the AG. And that's not his job. He was sounding like the AG in the sense of not just the fact that the content was similar or almost the same or even potentially the same, but he was sounding like a defense counsel.
It's interesting that you say that, because I was listening to that clip then, I was thinking, is he an independent senator?
There's more, you know. There's more justification that he tries to give that I couldn't keep any edit based off of time. And he does a good job make himself sound like he's trying to be independent. But his conclusions, it leaves me question. I don't want to say that he's not independent and get all assertive, but he sounds like he's playing defense for the government. It's difficult not to have that impression, at least to me.
Same thing with me, because I was watching that video and, Senator Anthony Vieira, independent Senator Anthony Vieira in the past, I thought has made some very good points. But in that particular clip, I'm listening to it and I'm listening to what he's saying and what he's suggesting, the points for his arguments, and I'm thinking, hang on, I've heard similar sentiments being expressed previously. Furthermore, the mere fact that you're making the argument or pointing out that, well, there was all these judges who voted in favor, but when it went to the Privy Council, a majority of 3 overruled. And then he went on to suggest that if the majority was different, in other words, if the majority was chosen from a different quadrant, even suggesting that because 2 of the judges were Scottish, descent, did that have an impact on the judgments as well? Even saying it might have been a bow shot at Westminster. I was confused. I was saying, listen, what does this really have to do with what we're debating here today? If you want to give history and context, you're not doing a very good job at it. You're just actually skewing your argument further.
I think I understand one of the arguments given by the opposing side. I don't necessarily want to just say the opposition bench or the lawsuit, is the fact that, this is going against the Constitution, which technically it does not, because local government is not technically in any part of the Constitution, right? So technically, the government is correct. This could be where the opposition's communication is doing themselves a disservice, but the irony is the opposition has more or less dropped that issue. So they approach the issue in a technically incorrect manner, and the ruling more or less showed that, look, you're all saying this is unconstitutional, it's a waste of time. The opposition has dropped it. The government is still defending it, still trying to defend, look, this was constitutional, and now the independent senators coming in and saying it. Furthermore, when he basically says this is conjecture about the Scottish law lords and how their politics might be influencing the decision, well, I have to ask, is this Senator Vieira sending a shot across the bow of our parliament saying, well, look, I am priming you to say we should be on the CCJ and not with the Privy Council?
You also have to understand it is very much a fine line as well. Because from time to time as an independent, you are going to agree.
Yes.
Or disagree. It's going to happen. We've positioned ourselves here on Talking Point as being impartial, never aligning ourselves with one side. But we have been accused of being biased many a times. Why? Because there are times that we would agree with what the government does, or we would disagree. We would agree with what the opposition does, or disagree. So there is a fine line as well to being an independent. You're in that position where you have a privilege of not having to toe a line, but at the same time, there are going to be times you're going to agree or disagree. So as much as I'm questioning where Senator Anthony Vieira was coming from, and as much as I'm saying it skewed his argument, I think it took away from the argument that he was trying to make, even going into the narratives of the Scottish descendants and all that sort of stuff. I also recognize and understand that there's going to be times that, listen, you know what? It's a very good point that the Attorney General made. I'm going to agree with this in my argument. You know, I disagree with what... Put it this way. The same argument we're making for Anthony Vieira, I could also ask, should independent Senator Varma Dialsingh praise Mr. Balgobin Maraj? Should he have said that as part of his contribution to the debate? Because we all know that Mr. Balgobin Maraj is an activist who's aligned with the opposition. So, I mean, come on. It works both ways.
The interesting thing is, I found that independent Senator Vieira was similar to the AG as well, or sounding similar to the AG, in the sense that he sounds very much like defense counsel, arguing the technicalities of the law if he is trying to present a legal defense. But he's not in the courtroom, as the opposition likes to point out to the government. He is in the Senate. He is not acting as defense counsel. He is an independent senator. So to me, I would argue that he needs to have wider considerations beyond just what he thinks is good technical legal doctrine, which, just like the government, you're on one hand saying, well, look, you know, the Privy Council rule and we have to go with the ruling because that's the law of the land and the majority rules. But 5 out of 8 judges agreed with us. And in this case, whereas it's one thing for the other senator to, you know, praise the activist. But what is he doing? Well, he's praising the activists for a singular situation. It doesn't necessarily go beyond that, right? The judgment does have far-reaching implications for Commonwealth jurisdictions. But Senator Vieira's statements, and we've said this when the AG said it, it potentially undermines the authority of the Privy Council. Because what you're saying is, yes, we understand that this is the law of the land, Privy Council is senior, but you're constantly trying to make the argument that there is validity when the appeal court judges side with our situation. You're trying to bring in the draftsmen, the appeal court judges, all the people underneath the Privy Council to justify, well, look, legally we're not that wrong.
No, Sean, I'm sorry, I disagree with you in that sense. I don't think anybody has the power to undermine the Privy Council. I don't even think any of the statements expressed
but you're doing it.
I think the thing is, in the sense that even though you're saying, in defense of independent Senator Dr. Varma Dialsingh, that, listen, okay, you know, he praised Ravi Balgobin Maraj for a singular issue because the case has far-reaching implications, etc., etc. What he's done, that is independent Senator Varma Dialsingh, and what independent Senator Anthony Vieira have done, is skew perception. And this is what I'm saying. It's very difficult, and in the society that we live in, it's just how we're debating it right now. There are going to be moments when you think, listen, hold on, they sound as though they're politically aligned, when in fact they have every right to express what they did. So I don't think it's necessarily a matter of undermining the Privy Council, for example. What I will say, where I will agree with you, is you do have to be careful what you say, because public education and public perception, unfortunately in TNT that we live in and how people tend to think, he ain't doing justice, he ain't doing good.
All I'll say is this. First of all, there are many examples in history where horrible things were approved of by the majority, not just little things like this. But second of all, this is how you get your government, your society to degrade. It's little steps. So like you said, in the public discourse, you make it seem, well, yeah, the Privy Council is the final, court, but we'll still lump in all these other legal opinions with them, and to some degree make it seem as though, unofficially they carry the same weight And that's how you start the process. It's not an overnight thing of undermining the Privy Council, which is why I said, just like he had that comment on the Scottish Law Lords, is he now taking a shot across the bow at the Privy Council and making a case to go to the CCJ, right? The answer is he's probably not. But based off of his logic and how he judged the Scottish Lords, I'm just using his logic to now craft a similar hypothesis, a similar line of reasoning onto him.
Don't use somebody else's logic to try and...
against them?
No, not
Why
against
not?
them. To come up with a theory, because we have not one clue what Anthony Vieira really is thinking. And trust me, I'm basing that over the fact that I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago, and even I was... Let's take a break here, ladies and gentlemen.
The best laptops and tablets are at dbesttoys.com. Get a Gateway 14.1-inch Ultra Slim notebook or an HP 14-inch laptop at the best prices in TNT. Get the Fire 7 tablet for $474. You can also shop the latest Amazon Fire Sticks. Call now at 32-DBEST to order or visit us in-store at Forces flagship Mac Bean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Free delivery available throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Cash or links on delivery.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fanzone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. And we're sticking on the topic of what was debated in the Senate yesterday, the Municipal Corporation's Extension of Terms of Office and Validation Bill 2023. We just touched on, well, one of the independent senators' contributions, but to get into now the opposition-government debate, which, what I saw, I didn't see the whole thing, but it was pretty entertaining to watch. And informative. We have with us, of course, our usual Thursday contributor, Senator Jayanti Lachmidyal, who was one of the early speakers in that debate. So, Senator Lachmidyal, thank you for joining us this morning. First of all, good morning. How are you going? It's been a while since we've been able to see you.
Because, we have a very incredibly busy schedule these days, both parliamentary and, of course, my usual gig, which is really the law. So very, very busy. But I'm glad to be able to see you as well today and not just be on the telephone. So I'm doing well. Good morning to you and all of your viewers.
So something interesting happened while you were speaking yesterday. The government, I think, was to some extent interrupting you, and the president of the Senate actually had to, give them pause and say, well, look, Senator Lakshmi Dayal is directly answering some of the claims that was made by the government. Now, it seems as though the narrative over this issue is very much trying to be contested by both sides. So I don't know if you could kind of give us a brief summary of some of the things that went on in the debate over this bill.
Yeah. So this debate yesterday was a validation bill, meaning that because of the government's incompetence, because of the fact that they, and I say deliberately, and I'll get into why I say deliberately, placed a wrong interpretation on the law and allowed persons to act beyond their term of office. It's necessary now to validate their actions. Otherwise, regional corporations will face an avalanche of litigation. Money spent will be done. So, it was wrong, actually. They had no power to do it. So Parliament has to now come and fix the mess created by the government. And I want to reiterate, which I did yesterday, because people were saying that, Parliament made a bad law. No, Parliament made a perfectly good law. It's just that specific section I'm speaking about the 4-year too. It's that the government decided that they will put a spin on it and interpret it in such a way as to put off elections. So we went there to fix it. Of course, part of the debate centered around the fact that we were there because of the government's, sorry, forgive me, I think I'm picking up a little bug. But, we were there because they insisted that they had the correct interpretation. From November last year, the UNC came out, we went to court, we wrote them pre-action correspondence. We said, you're wrong, this cannot be done. We asked the court to injunct them. And that's where I got into the affidavit evidence of the minister, who said that you cannot stop people from acting in office for the, until this matter is heard, because that will be, disastrous, and garbage will pile up high to the sky, and local government will become, will totally shut down, and nobody to activate disaster management. And he went to town before the court, saying it couldn't happen. Lo and behold, now that they get licks in the Privy Council, they have come and said, well, we'll call the election 3 months from the date of the judgment. So for the next 3 months, I'm so sorry. For the next 3 months, you have no local government representatives. For the last 6 months, you have been deprived of the opportunity to vote for your own representative, which you ought to have had since December. Well, they had 3 months, right? So from between December and March, we should have had an election. They imposed the representation upon you. And now they have come to try. And one of the reasons why I was perhaps so vociferous yesterday is because the PNM are always, and this is something that they do continuously, they try to spin the narrative. So we actually went to the level, and I consider it to be stooping below the white line in the road, where they started to analyze the composition of the panel in the Privy Council and say that, oh, well, we had 2 Scottish judges, and supported, of course, by some independents who, bring the word independence into, question, but coming there to say that the Privy Council had 2 Scottish judges who ruled in the favor of the UNC, and perhaps, they have their own issues, and this was really meant to be a shot across the bow at the English Parliament, and all kind of excuses for why they lost. And at the end of the day, it was a matter of statutory interpretation that they did not get wrong. I say deliberate. And let me tell you why I say deliberate. The leader of the opposition, when the bill was first being debated in 2019 in the House, when it was laid, before it went to the Joint Select Committee, raised the issue of the increase in time for councillors and aldermen, the increase in the term of office from 3 years to 4 years, and asked whether or not it was important to bring something into the bill, like a clause or proclamation or something like that, in order to say that it will not affect sitting councillors because you don't want to extend the life of sitting councillors and aldermen. And the Minister of Local Government, who was then the Attorney General, got up and said, that's rubbish, that's nonsense. As I will quote my Honourable Prime Minister, that is poppycock. But, you know, it is the same concern reason, it's the same thing they turned around and did in 2022. Because and that's why I say they could not have been doing so under any misapprehension about statutory interpretation. It was deliberate. It was a deliberate attempt to avoid facing the electorate at a time when they were at their absolute lowest.
Senator, the next step is in this entire conversation is local government reform as well. In fact, the Minister of Local Government, Faris Harawi, stood up yesterday and said that if the government had actually listened to the suggestion by the opposition leader that she demanded elections first and then reform after, he says you can't have your cake and eat it too, as none of the councillors would have benefited from it. How do you respond to the minister?
That I would respond by saying what I always say. He is intellectually bankrupt, and the only thing worse than being not very bright is being lazy. And that is a terrible combination. And unfortunately, we find a lot of that in this PNM government, particularly I find on the Senate bench. There's a way that you do those things. Firstly, you proclaim legislation when you are ready to roll out and you are ready to bring in reform, okay? If you want to reform a system. You make sure that all of the infrastructure is there. You put things in place to make sure that you can operationalize things. This particular incarnation of the PNM are famous for bringing laws, and it remains on the statute books and it goes nowhere. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that, and I made mention in the past, when you want to have things that would affect a sitting council or alderman, for example, extending the term of office, you're delaying, whatever, you come with a specific provision that says that this will now apply to persons who were X, Y, and Z beforehand. So there's nothing wrong with doing that. There's just a right way of doing things. You don't try to slip it through the back door. What you do is you come to the parliament and you say, we've had an election. We have persons who were elected for a period of 3 years. We now wish to extend their time for 4 years. We are bringing a specific provision to the parliament to say we want to do this. We have provisions now where we want to restructure local government. And for example, they are introducing, which I oppose, this concept of executive councils within the corporations, right? To be selected by the mayors. I oppose it because really that silences the voice of minority within councils, right? No two ways about it. And if it is that they want to make that and bring that on stream, whilst the councillors who are now to be elected are sitting, then you bring the appropriate amendment or bill to Parliament to say that that's what you want to do. That's all. There's a way that you do things properly, and there's a way that you do things when you are, I don't know, the beneficiary of very poor legal advice, or when you are just lazy. And that's what it is. You see, they are afraid to come to the Parliament and face criticism. All they had to do, if it is that these reforms are so important and necessary to turn on during this 12-month extension, is to do what Patrick Manning did on 3 occasions. Right? You bring a 2-clause bill to the Parliament and say elections which are to be held on X date are due to be held by or on before X date will now be held by so-and-so date. And you bring it to the Parliament and you ask the Parliament to debate it. You give parliamentarians on all benches an opportunity to speak on it. And yes, it's simple majority legislation and it will pass. But you don't hide. You don't do things surreptitiously, because that is where the problem comes in. And that's the problem that they face here. Had they brought the Patrick Manning style amendment to defer the election and to give themselves a year or 2 years or even more time to roll on and turn on their reforms, they would not have faced the challenge that they faced in court.
Wow.
But again, they can't adopt that approach because they don't want to face criticism from the Parliament and the wider population.
A Patrick Manning policy for a Keith Rowley-led administration. That's an interesting combination. So, Opposition Senator, it is your strongest opinion that the current administration is not getting local government reform done the right way?
Well, they're not getting it done at all. And one of the points that I raised in rebuttal yesterday, when they keep trying to justify their illegality with the election deferral, is saying that, they were turning on reforms. And I made reference to their own words. It's their own words that always come back to bite them. When they announced the deferral of the election, they rolled out something called a timetable. And they spoke about, the 50-something different changes, and some could be done immediately, some could be done 2 to 3 months, some could be done within 6 months, etc. Well, it's been 6 months since November last year, and not a single change or not a single reform has been rolled out in terms of that package of legislation that they passed. The only thing they did is say that the term of office changes and the election will not be held in 2022, will be held in 2023. Other than that, absolutely nothing has been done. What they have been doing is going to the areas where they feel that they are shaky and that seats that they think they could lose in very key corporations, and they're now trying to make up for what they haven't done for the past 3 years. And I have no qualms about saying that, because I'm very active on the ground in some of those areas and in some of those corporations, and I see it every day. So we see through the charade that they try to put on. With respect to them not getting it done right, there are particular things in that reform that the opposite, and that's why we didn't support the bill. We abstained from voting on it, because there are specific things that we disagree with. Let me explain that executive council thing to you. They are creating these executive councils, and they say it is to mimic, like in the THA, you have a chief secretary, and then you have secretaries responsible for different areas and so on. So they want the corporations to run that way. But it is the mayor who ultimately will represent the party that wins the majority in a corporation. So where you have a split corporation, San Fernando, San Grande, Siparia, and others, the mayor or the chairman is the person representing the party that gets the majority of seats. You will still have a minority in San Fernando. Let me give you the example. You have 6 PNM, 3 UNC. When you set up these executive councils, it is the mayor who will then appoint people to these councils to take responsibility for different things: public health, infrastructure, this, that, the other. So anywhere that the mayor wants to have ultimate control, there's no requirement. For example, this is when you talk too much. There's no requirement, for example, that you must have someone from a minority on one of those councils. So what they can do when either a PNM or a UNC control corporation, and it's unfair either way, and I speak on fairness, and that's one thing that I think that I have earned the respect of many people. And despite whatever people might try to come and say to tarnish my character and get personal with me and so on in the parliament, I've earned a lot of respect because I'm fair. Imagine in a UNC control corporation where you might have 9 districts, and you have 7 UNC and maybe 2 PNM. Those 2 PNM people may not be appointed by the UNC chairman on any of those executive councils, and they will have no say in the day-to-day administration for those very key areas. And vice versa, in a PNM control corporation, they can basically isolate the minority UNC and put them on not a single one of those committees to have any input. Now tell me, how is that taking local government reform forward?
Senator, we're almost out of time, but I just wanted to touch on the property tax, because local government and property tax kind of go hand in hand. That's also something you want to touch on. We don't have time to get too deep into it, but one thing I did want to ask you, one of our discussions, Karen basically said that, look, this 50% requirement to just get the valuation moving forward, she thinks it's a stalling tactic. And I'm wondering if it's kind of similar to some of your opinions with regards to local government reform, that we're seeing tactics being used and not necessarily reform and implementation. Would you agree with that?
Well, I don't know if it's stalling, but what it is that they were trying to, the law requires that to trigger the process, you get 50% of the evaluations done. And so they're making a modification to that. But, the bigger issue here is that you don't impose taxes and roll out taxes until you address the big picture of the economy. And that's the UNC's position here. One of the critical issues that we see facing this government and the population right now, and that the government is really failing on, is the issue of tax returns, refunds, VAT refunds to small businesses. And when they are pushing forward and trying to get more and more taxes being placed on the regular person, residential properties, and then eventually commercial properties and so on. It's like you're just taking more out of people who you have already taken from, and you are not doing your part to give back. And there's something we call a social contract between a government and its people. And I believe that this government continuously breaches that social contract because there's a total lack of fairness and consideration. Now, they have been trying to collect property tax since, I think, 2017 or so on. They can't get it right up to now. They have to keep tweaking the law. But at the end of the day, what they are adamant about is that they are going to get this done, no matter how many concerns are raised. And they are very aloof. They are very, how to put it? I know sometimes almost condescending when they respond to questions and concerns raised by the population about property tax and whether or not it will be an additional strain on the population. But that is just the nature of this government, and that's how they operate. That's how they treat with criticism. They treat you with contempt. They've treated the population with contempt over local government elections. They treat you with contempt when you raise issues of property tax. The response from the government, sometimes I hear them on property taxes, imagine rich people don't want to pay $1,000 a year in property tax. It's not that rich people don't want to pay $1,000 a year. It's rich people are concerned about, even if you have a property worth $2 million or $3 million, that, they've lost so much opportunity due to economic decline in the last couple of years that they are not cash rich. You might have assets, but you don't have cash because their small businesses suffered. Their small businesses shut down during COVID. They didn't survive, the closure of Petrotrin. Do you know in South Trinidad, for example, and in what we call the fence line communities for Petrotrin in Pointe-a-Pierre, Marabella and other places, how many people depended on that refinery being operational for their business? They are small contractors, subcontractors, whether it was a contractor cut grass in Petrotrin or to provide food to people in Petrotrin, because Marabella was a buzzing hub of activity when the refinery was running. Those people still own buildings on the main road in Marabella. Their address is Southern Main Road, Marabella. It will be categorized as commercial. Some of them live upstairs and the businesses downstairs, but the businesses have shut down. You are coming down to value the asset that they have and impose property tax on them when their income has been compromised by PNM's mismanagement of the economy.
Well,
nobody has addressed that issue as yet from the government.
I think we're going to have to end it there. Thank you very much for your time. I'm so sorry.
About coughing.
No, that's absolutely fine. In fact, I was just about to say I'm so sorry that you're coming under the weather, but I do hope you get some rest, and I hope you feel better very soon. Thank you for your time and your contribution.
Thank you again for having me. Have a good day to you and your viewers.
You too. Get some rest. Take care. Opposition Senator Chianti Miguel joining us on Talking Point this morning. We take a break here. When we return, we open up the phone line.
Oh boy.
The phone line.
Please.
If we could. We'll be right back after this.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
The best laptops and tablets are at dbesttoys.com. Get a Gateway 14.1-inch Ultra Slim notebook or an HP 14-inch laptop at the best prices in TNT. Get the Fire 7 tablet for $474. You can also shop the latest Amazon Fire Sticks. Call now at 32-DBEST to order or visit us in-store at Forces flagship MacBean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Free delivery available throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Cash or links on delivery.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit? Yes. What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive, it is not rehabilitative.
We the police officers, we are professional and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, it's for all of us in public.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us once more this morning. It's an opportunity now for you to express your thoughts and opinions with us as we open up the phone line, 628-4578. I can't wait for the day that I'm able to use the term in plural form once more.
Oh, yes.
Instead of phone lines. 628-4578, that is the number to call. It should be up on your screen in a moment or two, probably two, but we have a caller on the line with us from Pretty Valley. Good morning, caller. Hello, good morning. Don't tell me that phone line is... Hold on.
We can hear. Morning, caller.
Go ahead, caller.
Morning, Sean and Keaton.
Morning.
I'm straying from all the conversation this morning a little. I just want to be quick.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know if the tape with Farley is authentic and why we're going into 2 weeks now and not a statement from Dr. Israel, Mr. Farley.
Mm-hmm.
What is his, the media not going, is his technicalities, everybody afraid to tackle it or what? I just want to know if his tape is authentic. And by now, Mr. Farley should come out and get a statement. Have a good day, guys.
Thank you very much. You're not straying from it. That's a very important point. Yep. I fully agree.
Yep.
Because if it's authentic, you still have to come out and try and clarify what's taking place. If it's not authentic, come out and simply say, it's not us.
But more to the point, wasn't part of their campaign saying, we're not them? But you're kind of acting like them.
Farley Augustine has done nothing to distinguish himself from his opponents. Farley Augustine has fallen into that same category.
Right, and we don't want to say bad things, without evidence of a politician. But like other politicians, if you don't make any attempt to refute something that is very difficult for us to reasonably assume is not to be true.
All right, could we just put the phone lines on the screen, please, for our callers? The phone, yes, the phone line. Could we just thank you very much there. We have a caller with us from Shogunas. Good morning. Good morning, Shogunas.
Hi, good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Keaton and Dr. Small. The presentation of Lakshmi Dayal this morning was really remarkable, and also I want to bring to the attention the performance by Khadija Amin against Al-Rawi in another debate. It is the first time I see where they stood up against the speaker, stopping them all the time from being able to carry across their point of view. And more or less, the speaker this time with Lakshmi Dayal sort of consented with Lakshmi Dayal, giving her opportunity to speak when Al-Rawi stood up with standing orders all the time. It was kind of embarrassing. The other thing is the support they had was the AG, who doesn't know if he's a QC or a SC. Let me stop there. There are other kind of C, right? And then you have files missing. Then you have a whole series, I think, following one after the other, while a set of cases went underground. So the problem here is where they try to embarrass the Privy Council by saying that the Privy Council had only three votes, and they were told that it is a Duckworth-Lewis system they're trying to use, where they want to count how much people in the lower court support the thing, like if rain falling in cricket, and then the phrase that Al-Rawi used, poppy cup, it was so embarrassing how it came back to sting him when Lakshmi Dayal responded. It was like a national comedy fest. That was so embarrassing. It was unbelievable.
All right, Kola. Well, thank you very much.
Sorry, we have to end you there because we want the phone line to be open
and
for
there's
other
a
calls.
lot more with respect to Lakshmi Dayal's conversation in that debate.
Yeah. All right, Kola. Thank you. Do have a good day.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Kola.
So, as my coach just pointed out, I apologize for having to intervene and cut the caller, but because we have the one phone line open, we'd like to give everybody the opportunity to make a contribution. So I've always asked if we can keep it short and sweet, simple and to the point.
No, to be fair, it's not. One could argue that the AG is playing fast and loose with his spin. But I do think it was a good and interesting debate to look at on the multiple participants speaking. So I would encourage people to check out that video. You can find it on the Parliament YouTube page.
Forgive me, did Sean just use a cricket analogy?
No, actually, that was completely unintentional.
Oh.
Now, we have a caller on the line from Tobago.
Crikey, I was about to give him credit for that. Good morning, caller from Tobago.
Hey, good morning, Kitan. Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Kitan, I actually wanted to kind of flip back to a conversation you were having on AM Prime this morning with a young woman, a pediatrician. And she was talking about, the virtues of eating whole foods and things of that nature. And someone online asked a question or made a comment that it's not easy to eat healthy when tomatoes is over $20 a pound and access to fast food is easy. And as somebody who has been a vegan for 30-something plus years, even raw food for 2.5 years, I just started eating fish for the very first time February 14, 2017, 5:37 p.m. in the evening when I returned to Tobago. What I had to say to that was the more whole the foods you eat, the less you need. And I'm talking from experience. The less you need, the less your body needs, because the more whole your foods, the more your cells are actually receiving their nutrients, which is one of the real reasons for eating. So the less you need to eat. Eating fast foods and highly processed foods will have you eating more empty calories, so you tend to eat more foods and with more frequency. And when you add up the cost of the money you're spending on that cheap fast food, it may very well be more or equal to the money you're spending on the whole foods, but the fast food is actually damaging your body while the whole foods are benefiting your body. That's the comment I wanted to make at this time, sir. All right?
Thank you very much,
Thank you
caller.
for that.
Thank you very much for that advice. Very good advice.
I'm not a nutritionist, but I do believe that there is, at the very least, some truth to that, because processed food is not very good for you. It's not very nutritious. And like you said, empty calories. There's a lot of foods that, they'll give you calories, but they don't actually give you nutrition that's essential or vital for your body.
Spikes your insulin, so it makes you feel full. A couple hours later, you're hungry again, starving again. So, that's good advice, caller. Thank you very much for that point that you made. 628-4578. That is the phone line. That's working.
I am surprised, both pleasantly surprised, but also ironically somewhat disappointed that Mr. Pidivali didn't challenge us, because I could see where it might seem that, okay, we're biased now, the opposition we're not challenging Senator Lachmidial, and I'm wondering if they have people who are not calling in who might have those thoughts. So just to kind of voice that potential on.
I'm not
unspoken.
disappointed.
No, I wouldn't mind. I don't mind the challenge for the opportunity for discussion. That's why.
It's not that. It's just that Mr. Pitty Valley has expressed himself as being impartial, and he's always expressed his opinions openly. Being impartial, he has expressed favor or agreement with both sides, and that's probably why he hasn't necessarily challenged it. The thing is that you saying that how you don't mind facing the challenge for not challenging Jayanti Lachmidial. I guess I'm in a different position. I don't mind anybody challenging me, but I know for one I challenge Jayanti Lachmidial all the time.
Well, yes, that is true. That is true.
I challenge Jayanti Lachmidial all the time. I challenge any individual. I had Senator Damian Leiter on yesterday. He's an opposition senator. And I challenge him as well.
The reason why I bring it up is your track record, a lot of viewers or some viewers don't follow your track record. They just follow what they see in the immediate, this episode. And even then, sometimes they miss important information of what you said in the same episode that they're criticizing you when you actually already answered those criticisms preemptively before they even brought it up.
You're always going to face criticism for anything that you do. And you're always going to face won't even see criticism. You'll face a lot of hate and nastiness when you know you're doing a good job.
But the point ultimately that I want to make was, you could take all of the political wrappings off of what the senator said, and for the most part, not only do I have a hard time disagreeing with the main points that she made, but some of those same points was already made on this show before she made it, right? So my attempt to present an alternative motivation for the government of saying, well, no, they want to push local government reforms. You already was challenging that from the moment I said it. And she has now come and said, well, look, the stats prove that it's not there, right? That we haven't seen the reform. So now it's reached the point, well, if we haven't seen any implementation, my attempt to give an alternative theory as to why it's not malicious is kind of looking worse and worse, and that's now actually left me with the position of, well, maybe this is more malicious than I necessarily wanted to attribute it.
So the next question is, when does the campaign start and when does the campaign end? Because if
does it ever end?
And that's the whole point of the question.
Look at the THA. It never ends. And if they're spending all this time campaigning, how much of it do they spend on governing?
Good point, by the way, made by the caller from Pitty Valley. I find the media has been very poor in their attempts to try and get answers to this question. And this is why I speak about the media and their position as the Fourth Estate.
Mm-hmm.
I am always, you say it all the time in terms of communication. I would always advise that a politician does not rush just to making a statement for making a statement's sake. But we're beyond that now. It's over a week. We're actually into the second week that nothing has been said, nothing has been spoken about, and it is perhaps the biggest issue coming out of Tobago right now. And he has not taken any opportunity to defend himself or his THA. He hasn't taken any opportunity to refute any claims. And he also has, and I wonder if his attitude is, it's just going to go away, leave it, let it die a natural death. Or whether or not he's taking very long because he still has no clue how to respond to this. Whatever it is, the unfortunate thing is, Farley, Augustine and friends, again, have shown no great distinction between themselves and those before them. It's quite unfortunate that it's been, a year and a half that this is taking place? Is it a year and a half? Yes, it's a year and a half, right? And up until this point, I can't say that I'm impressed. Because if you want to compare the last 18 years to this year and a half, really, what is the difference?
Look, and I think to some extent now in hindsight, I have to be a bit more critical on even how we handled the situation overall with their tenure, because everybody wanted to give them a chance, and if you were too critical of them, that's the comments generally that you would get. Give them a chance. And to be fair, it wasn't wrong because they don't have a track record. This is not like parliamentarians who have been in parliament, whether they're backbench minister, junior minister, they have a track record. So, after a year or two, after a couple of years, we kind of knew what the Keith Rowley administration was going to be. We didn't need to have 5 full years for it to play out, right? We just needed about 1 or 2 years to see. Now with the THA, one could argue, okay, they don't have a full term yet, but things are kind of going so bad.
Which is the best thing for the BNM Tobago Council?
Yes, which is, the irony is, it's not about how bad the Tobago People's Party, aka Farley and Friends, aka the THA executive looks. It's not just about them. It's about what it means both, 1, for new parties coming up, 2, for Tobago autonomy, 3, for the fact that, look, the incumbent, particularly the PNM, is validated in its stance of, we don't need to be that great. We just need to be better than. And being better than, whether it's the UNC or the PDP, is not that hard.
I'll expand on in a bit. We have a caller on the line with us from San Fernando. Good morning, caller. Hello, good morning.
Morning, you're on the air. Hold on, my caller. Guys, if we could raise the volume on the call. Caller, you might need to...
Hello?
Yes, hi.
You hear me?
Yes.
Okay, gentlemen. Morning. 2 things I wanted to comment on. The first is with Senator Lakshmi Dayal and her political leader saying that they were successful in the Privy Council. I was of the opinion, based on Mr. Ravi Bhargava Maharaj's words, that he is independent. This is something he did on his own. So it seems to be, in my opinion, that he's an agent of the UNC, because the way how they have now embraced it and saying that they have won in the Privy Council. That's the first thing. The second thing is back to this local government reform issue. The 50% to trigger that they need to trigger the rollout. My worry with that is this. That 50% trigger would allow them to send out bills to people. What happens to the other 50% that they have not done? Isn't that putting the first 50% at a disadvantage? Is there a timeline? Because I have not seen any timeline saying after this 50% is triggered, within 1 year, within 2 years, we're going to finish the rest of the roll and send out bills to those people. Is it that the first 50% people are going to be put at a disadvantage of paying money while the others in the population are not paying? This needs to be cleared up, because I have a real issue with this. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
It's very interesting that you raise that point, because the next part for me is, what are the areas that make up the 50% that would not be paying property tax when...
Well, it's all theoretical, right?
It is theoretical, which is why I'm adding my question to what he's just said. No. If that be the case, very good point, need clarification, I can't say a question. What are the areas?
We know how the ministry in 2010 would have handled it. Karen said that their plan was, look, we're not going to have a minimal threshold before we implement the rollout. We're going to roll it out under the caveat that we're telling people, self-report yourself, because if you don't, not only will you owe all of the back taxes, but you could face financial penalties for not declaring your situation and not seeking to have it formalized and clarified and finalized. So I suspect that could still be utilized even with this 50% threshold. But again, we haven't been told. And if they're going to change things with the 50%, then they might have changed more of how that part of the process operated. We don't know. And then your question as to who and where the non-paying 50% comes into play.
I'll answer your first question after this call. Our final call for the morning. Good morning, caller.
Good morning.
Morning.
Farley, I don't know what is the conversation with Farley, right? But I want to deal with the thing where they talk about where the AMA. Farley and them could fly the bridge over the sea. These are the mistakes the PNM government have been making. They should have fly the whole road on the south line. Mayaro fly the road. You need to fly a road across the sea. You see, we have to look in that so you wouldn't interfere with the ecosystem. You know the soil always moving. You know that. Why go down doing the same thing over and over? And Farley's policy is this. Mother, they have grown up that if you have nothing good to say, don't say nothing. And sometimes a still tongue is better than whatever. People will always say things about you, but the truth will always set you free. And people always believe. And I believe that PNM is time to move from the Privy Council. Since you have problems, move from there and come to the thing. Okay, that's the most I can say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Father.
The truth will always set you free.
The problem is...
How many people have lied to us and are still
in
free
politics,
today?
yeah, we don't get the truth.
At least we don't think we get the truth.
It doesn't seem like it. We don't feel like we get the truth.
As per Ravi Balgobin Mirage, caller from San Fernando, let's be real, he is an activist who honestly seems to be aligned with the United National Congress. And when Genty made that statement, I could only assume she meant in terms of herself and the legal team. Kamala Basabi says it's a different slice of cake. Genty Lachmiyal was actually a member of Ravi Balgobin Mirage's legal team, who argued before the Privy Council.
Full disclosure, that's the one part of a presentation where I would say I think we would disagree, because she was giving the opposition leader a lot of props in her arguments yesterday in the Senate.
She has to if she wants to keep her job.
I know. So that's, and the thing is, we don't necessarily want to put on the spot for something that is not necessarily central to the issue, of course, being local government and the Privy Council ruling and all of that. So,
Sean,
but,
it's part of the problem, Sean.
Well, it is part of the wider problem of politics. Yes.
Those are certain things that you should challenge.
So perhaps that is one day, you know.
Sean, are you showing your colors? You pause, man.
I don't have colors to show.
Anyway, no, I understand what you're saying. However,
it's a balancing act. When you have interviews, it's a balancing act. Right?
I would still think that it's blatantly obvious. It's not something to just sweep under the carpet. I asked Senator Genty Lachmiyal when this ruling came out, I said, how do you actually separate the lines of being an opposition senator and an attorney at law? She says it goes hand in hand. It's very difficult to separate. The bigger problem is that now when these cases come up, precisely what role do you play as the attorney? Are you just a lawyer, or are you a politician who is trying to make a case on behalf of the client?
To be fair, that's more or less some of my criticisms I had for the independent senator Anthony Vieira early in the show this morning. So I can't make state what I said about him and then try to refute what you're saying now. I do think, though, I suspect she does a better job than most on being able to wear the two hats and responding appropriately in the forums. That doesn't necessarily mean to say that she does it perfectly and that she is without fault to do it. Nobody's perfect. I don't even think she herself will say that. So it brings up an interesting question. I don't necessarily like her answer to the question that you asked when she said that they go hand in hand. I don't know if I necessarily, because the implications of it, and it's just implications, but, I don't know if I like it.
Let's just pause there for now. That's it for Talking Point, Sean. I hope you have a good day, and I hope you have your umbrella with you.
Darn it.
How sad. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for Talking Point. I'm Keith Joe, wishing you a great day ahead. Remember, today is a good day to have a good day. I hope you have an umbrella, because we're due for some heavy rain today and tomorrow.
Umbrella? I think you need me more like, I hope you have like a boat, a flotation device, sandbags, a motor vehicle that might be 6 feet off the ground. That's what you really should be hoping for some places in the country. Yeah,
that as well. Anyway, guys.
Hold on. Your politicians filled with hot air in case of emergency, they can be used as a flotation device. Just saying.
Captain, the ship is sinking. We'll see you again tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is